An ever-changing arena houses the most gruesome battles. Fame, money, glory, or just the pure satisfaction of owning noobs. Whatever the motivation, it all gets settled in the Deathmatch. F.P.S Deathmatch is a turn-based combat mock of first-person shooters, both old and new, featuring characters based on player playstyles that have grown over time. The game can be played with 2 to 4 players. F.P.S Deathmatch comes with a minimal amount of pieces so that you can get right into the action. 9 double-sided tiles, 4 character cards and figures, 60 combat deck cards, 35 power-up cards. Players set up the tiles in a 3x3 square using any side they want, facing any direction. This allows for a different arena every playthrough. Players shuffle both the combat deck and the power-up deck and set them within reach of all players. Each player chooses a character to play and places both the card and figure in front of them. Each player starts the game with 5 cards from the combat deck. Starting with the player of the group's choice and then proceeding clockwise, players place their figures on an open respawn point. Range and movement deal with tiles and squares. Range is in tiles, movement is in squares. You can move diagonally for 1 movement value. You cannot take attack actions into tiles diagonal to the tile you are currently on, unless you are on an adjacent square to it or have enough range. This is a point on a tile that players can choose to respawn. Some respawn points are red and some are blue. This does not affect the game, but allows for more game types to be created in future expansions. This is a point on a tile that players can move onto. While on this point, subtract 2 damage from any attacks that are not from adjacent enemies. Cover points do not block line of sight. Players cannot move onto this point on a tile. Walls block line of sight. Players can move on to this point on a tile. Players cannot move toward squares that diagonal walls block. Diagonal walls block line of sight. Legal movement and line of sight squares are highlighted in green. Each character in F.P.S Deathmatch is designed after a play style that is commonly seen in many first-person shooter video games. Each character has different strengths and weaknesses. It is up to you to use this knowledge to your advantage and maximize your ability to stomp your opponents into the dust. These are the cards you will use the most. The combat deck is composed of cards that can improve your damage or prevent you from taking damage altogether. It also contains cards that allow partial control of your enemy's actions. Make good use of these cards to control the flow of battle. You start the game with 5 combat cards. These cards are much more powerful than the combat deck and are harder to obtain. The power-up deck is composed of cards that can boost your health, movement, and even kill your opponents outright. It also contains cards that allow for extra attacks or negation of any card being played. These are special cards that can only be obtained either by playing certain combat cards or by killing your opponents. Every time you kill an opponent, you draw a power-up card. Unless stated on the card, you may play as many cards of each type as you wish. Make sure to take into account your character's special abilities in conjunction with both types of cards to get the maximum benefits. Each player's turn consists of 4 phases. On your turn, you complete the phases in this order: discard phase, draw phase, respawn phase, action phase. At the beginning of your turn, you must discard down to a hand of at most 5 cards, but you may discard as many cards as you like. Your hand may consist of a mix of combat and power-up cards. After you have finished discarding cards, you then draw cards from the combat deck until you have 5 cards in your hand. If you're already dead, you now choose an open respawn point to enter the arena from. Place your figure on the open respawn point of your choice. During your action phase, you have 3 actions you can take in any order. You may move any number of spaces up to your movement value. You may move, attack, and then finish your movement. You may take one attack action on any other player within your range value and line of sight. All attacks have a base damage of 1. Instead of taking an attack action, you may gain Overwatch. To gain Overwatch, flip your character card over. You cannot take a move action while in Overwatch. While in Overwatch, you may take an attack action if another player moves. Another player takes an attack action. Overwatch attacks are made before the normal attack. Another player chooses to gain Overwatch instead of taking an attack action. When you decide to take an attack action, first determine which enemy player is within your line of sight and range value. Line of sight is determined by tracing an unblocked straight line from the middle of the square your figure occupies to the middle of the square your target occupies. When taking your attack action after you have chosen your legal target, you play any cards you wish. Then allow your target to play any cards they wish. Then proceed clockwise to allow any other players to play cards to affect the combat. Once all players have passed on playing cards, the damage resolves. When a player's health drops to 0 or below, that player is dead. Draw a power-up card as a reward for killing the enemy. When your health drops to 0 or below, you are dead. Discard all of your cards into their respective decks and remove your figure from the board. Don't worry, you will respawn on your turn. Make sure you get revenge. F.P.S Deathmatch is designed to be fast-paced both in setup and gameplay. It truly blurs the line between turn-based and real-time strategy games. Now you have the rules. Think you're ready for the deathmatch?